Hello everyone and welcome to Merlin's Manor as I finish up my 25 games of Christmas, where my wife and I played 25 games that were randomized through the use of our advent calendar, along with 19 family weight games, mostly that we played with our kids. A few of them just the wife and I wound up playing because the kids weren't interested that night. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the reviews of the games that we played this week. I'm going to be going ahead and changing up the format of the days here because I probably should have been doing this all along. We're going to go ahead and start in with the day of the month 22. So on day 22, we played Aquatica and Kites. Let's start out by talking about Kites. Kites is a real-time game, and real-time games aren't really games I play a lot of. I find a lot of them to be kind of okay, decent-ish, and that's kind of where this one falls. I give it a 6.5 out of 10. It's got some good, fun chaos to it for a filler game. It's a cooperative game where you are basically just trying to do your best to keep these timers from running out. Once you start on a sand timer, you have to flip it before it runs out, and they each have different kind of increments of time that they have. And so you're going to be having these cards that have different colored symbols on them that you are going to be playing in order to flip the different timers. And so you're going to be trying to keep an eye on timers that are starting to run out that you are able to flip. If you see one that's about to run out, you want to go straight for that one. And of course, a lot of them aren't going to be that close to running out, and so you have to make that kind of decision on the fly. Do I turn this one over even though it hasn't been going for long? Do I wait a little bit to try and get them to run out some and then flip? And you're working together to try and keep all of these timers from running out. If they didn't even run out, then you lose the game. And so this is a game that, again, it's not one that I'm going to say is an awesome game, but it's a decent filler game. The hardest part, though, is the finale, because once the last card from the deck is gone, you have until the white timer runs out. And so hopefully somebody that's paying attention flips that white timer right before the end there. And then you have to get all kind of just rushed really quickly to start flipping timers and that's probably the hardest part of the game right there. There's also some additional things we haven't played with yet, which kind of make it even more difficult, but I find the difficulty of the game itself already pretty high, and so we haven't worked those in yet. It's also a game that we have pretty much just played with our family, and so it's also going to be a little bit harder with kids trying to play this type of game. But it is a decent amount of fun for a filler game. The other game is Aquatica. Now, Aquatica is a game where you are trying to make different combos throughout the game. I rate it a 7 out of 10. It's a decent game that doesn't feel like it's going to have a ton of replayability, but then again, we haven't really mixed in anything extra yet. They have different goal tiles, which we found the original goals are pretty easy once you get the hang of the game, and so for the next game, we're going to definitely start mixing those goal tiles in that change things up a bit. And basically, you're trying to get these different locations that give you victory points when you get them raised all the way up. And it's got this neat kind of mechanism where you are sliding a card in to your personal player board, and then you are taking you're using the actions on those things to slide it up further, and then once you finally slide it up all the way to the top, you get those victory points by using the treasure chest action to go ahead and bank those victory points. And along the way, you have some dots that can't be filled in because they are blanks, and so you can't use those to move them up. You have to find one of the things that allows you to move something up 1 or 2 spaces. And sometimes you may want to decide to skip a benefit and move something up using one of those actions to get quicker to getting those victory points. You're also trying to be mindful along the way. There's 4 different goals that you are trying to achieve. And as soon as you can achieve those, you get the most points if you're the first one to do that. It's got a decent bit of things going on, decent bit of moving parts. You're getting cards into your hand that give you, by going to this little kind of market location kind of area to do that. And they each kind of give you different benefits. And so it's got a decent bit going on. Enjoy it. Aquatica. On day 23, we played Carcassonne and the Quest for El Dorado. Now, Carcassonne is a solid entry-level tile placement game where basically all you're doing on your turn is you are getting a tile and finding a place where you can put that tile where the artwork lines up. If it has a road, then it has to match up to a road. If it has a city, that city's going to have to match up. Grass is going to have to match up with grass. And then you can choose to put one of your meeples on there to be able to start the process of scoring points for whether it be a city, a monastery, a road, or farms if you're playing the farms, additional kind of way to play. And so you're just deciding where you're going to place your meeple and you're going to score when that city is filled, or when that road is filled, or when a monastery has 9 tiles around it, or the farm score at the end of the game. And so, very simple, especially if you start out without the farms, to get people kind of learning how it goes and then adding that in later on for some extra complexity. Not a whole lot to try and figure out, not a whole lot to try and puzzle out on your turn. You're only going to have so many options of where you can place your tile, and it's going to oftentimes become very obvious where the best place to put a tile is in the moment. And then the decision just becomes, do you want to put your meeple there or not? Because you only have a limited amount of meeples, and until you score the meeples that are already out there, you can't get them back. And so you kind of have to balance there. Very simple game. Recommend it, especially for those who are new to board gaming, and especially recommend it for you to use to kind of get people interested into the board gaming hobby. Carcassonne. And the other one is The Quest for El Dorado. And this is also a fairly basic kind of game. It's a deck building game where you are trying to race to El Dorado, and along the way you are using cards and you're building up a deck of cards. And there's a push and pull between using your cards for movement and using your cards to buy more cards. And if you spend too much time focusing in the early game on moving and not enough time on buying cards, then you're going to find yourself with a much weaker deck and you're going to be moving a lot slower than others. But then again, if you spend too much time focusing on building up your deck, you're going to fall way behind and you're going to not make it either. And so it's got this great balance between getting cards that are going to be helpful for you and using the cards you have to move along the path, and trying to make sure you have the right cards to move in different areas, because each card has a different terrain type and you're going to have to be moving through the different terrains. Sometimes you have to take a long way around because you don't have the right cards to move through a terrain. I found myself in that very situation in our game that we played where there was a 4 treasure area and I didn't have a lot of the treasure cards built up, and so it was like, and then everything else nearby was a 3 treasure, and I didn't have a lot of 3 treasures either, so I wound up having to go along the grass route around the outer edge of that area. So you kind of have to work out what you're going to be getting, and then of course you have to hope that the right ones come up in the right time, or else you're going to be spending more time just trying to buy more cards to get you through. It's a fun little deck building game, very kind of entry level. Recommended though, a 7 out of 10 is what I rate it. So on day 24, we played Cascadia as the family game and Meadow as the game for my wife and I. Now Cascadia is a pretty basic game to learn. It's not that difficult. All you're basically doing on your turn is you are picking a pairing between a terrain and an animal. And you are placing the animal where there is an icon where it matches. And you start out with a starting tile of 3 different terrains. And you are going to place that animal where you can place it. Of course, if you can't take the animal, you have to do something else. And you are placing that terrain somewhere. And of course, you place the terrain first, so you can always, if it's paired already, just go ahead and plop that animal right down where you got it, or somewhere else. And you're basically trying to get these animals in certain ways that get you points by having them together. And you're kind of different goal cards that you're going to be using in order to do that. Each one's going to have a different thing that's going to want. For instance, the bears oftentimes want to be paired together in certain ways, whereas the hawks like to oftentimes be separated. Sometimes like to be in line of sight of one another, or just sometimes away from one another. Sometimes they like to see animals between them, and all these different types of things. You've got salmon that you want to try and make runs of salmon. You've got foxes that are going to try to be around other animals oftentimes. And so you got all these different things that you're going to be trying to focus on in order to score points. And you're also trying to focus on the tiles that you put down, because for each terrain, the area that you have the most that are of that terrain, you're going to score 1 point for each of those ones that you have the largest amount of. And if you have the largest amount of that terrain between all players, you're going to get some bonus points for having the most there. And so you've got that to kind of contend with as well. And so you're both trying to focus on the terrain you're putting down, how you're putting that down to try and make huge amounts of different terrain, as well as get those bonus points for how you've placed your animals in. So it's a very simple concept to learn, but there's a lot of kind of thinkiness to it to try and figure out where you want to put things to maximize your points. Cascadia, I rate an 8 out of 10. And the other game we played was Meadow. Meadow, I rate a 9 out of 10. It has a lot of beautiful artwork to it, and it's a very fun kind of comboing type game where you are starting out, you've just got one place that you can place things, and there's a symbol on the top, and there's a symbol on the bottom. The bottom being kind of the habitat terrain kind of area, and the top being an animal symbol that's going to help you. And so what you have to do is different animals that are out there and different other things that are out there are going to require you to have certain symbols showing currently. Now your bottom ones, they always show no matter what happens, but the top ones you're going to cover up whenever you put a new card in. And so you're going to have this constant push and pull between, well, I'm going to have to cover up this symbol here that I might need later on. So trying to figure out how you can get more of that symbol is a challenge. Also, while you're worried about all of that, you're also being concerned about trying to race the other players to these different goals that are out there by having two different symbols in your habitat that meets the two goals that are paired together on this wheel. You also have different ways that you can use your turns. You can either use the little sticks that you have there to get a card from the tableau and play it into your tableau, or you can go ahead and use it for a special ability that it has. One of those special abilities is to play 2 cards, which is pretty powerful because you can only play 1 card per turn, less if you are doing some of the other special abilities. And so you are going to be trying to maximize when you use those things. That's also when you're able to get those goals scored as well. And you have one that allows you to take from anywhere because people may be blocking the spot that you need, but then you can use that to get around that. You also have one that allows you to kind of search through one of the decks if there's something that you're needing that you can try and search and get that. So there's a lot going on. But at the same time, it's got the simple concept of just trying to find the ways to make these different cards work by getting the symbols that will help you get these cards played in. It's a great kind of scoring points in different kind of ways type game. Kind of relaxing for the most part, except for, of course, that little bit of competition there around the goal board. Enjoy it very much. Rated a 9 out of 10. Okay, and day 25, Christmas Day, we played the Christmas edition of Patchwork. Patchwork is a 2-player polyomino placement game by Uwe Rosenberg. Now, Uwe Rosenberg is known for his great polyomino placement games, and this is another good one. I rate an 8 out of 10. And so basically what you're going to be doing on your turn is you're either going to be grabbing one of the 3 polyomino tiles that are closest to where the pawn is in the track. That's going to be this rondelle that you're going to be going around. And you are playing it into your board by paying the buttons that it costs to play. And if you're not able to do that, you can play a little bit of catch up on this time track board with your opponent by going just past them, and you get however many buttons it takes to get there. And you also get buttons throughout the game by going across these different areas where you get your income, which will give you buttons for however many buttons you have on the tiles that you have on your player board. And you're trying to fill up this player board because you will get -2 points for every space that isn't filled up. And you're trying to get as many different buttons throughout the game. First of all, to be able to purchase more tiles, but also at the end of the game, the buttons you get are your victory points. You also have this little challenge to be the first person to complete a 7x7 square on your board. If you do that, then you get 7 points right for that. And so you are going to try to balance the amount of buttons you're spending as well as trying to combat how much time you're using, because when you go further along this track, you're eventually going to run out of time, and the game's going to be ended for you. Also, as you go along this track, if you are still behind on the time from your opponent, then you get to go again. And so you kind of want to pace yourself a little bit certain times to allow yourself to get the tiles that are going to be best for you. And at other times you may want to run ahead a little bit to allow your opponent to take some of the tiles in between, if it's going to be a little while before the tile that you want comes up. And so I love the pacing of this game. It's a fairly quick game to play. Not a terrible amount of decision space to make, and at the same time it's got this great puzzly nature to it, as all Uwe Rosenberg games do. So I enjoy it very much. I rate it an 8 out of 10. And there's one game that we did not get to play on Christmas Day, and that was Isle of Cats Explore and Draw, which is a flip and write game based off of the bigger box game Isle of Cats. You're drawing these different polyomino shapes onto your ship. It's a fun game. I rated a 9 out of 10. If you want to see a little bit more about that game, you can go ahead and check out this video right here, which talks about the flip and write and roll and write mechanisms and some of the games that do that mechanism well, which I believe Isle of Cats Explore and Draw does that mechanism well. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.